The grand spires of Valorai's capital gleamed in the dual sunset, their crystalline surfaces refracting light across the cityscape. Inside one of the royal vessels sailing through the sky, Princess Elara Tworith stood at the viewport, her iridescent skin catching the fading light. Her four-fingered hand brushed against the ceremonial markings on her temple, symbols of the House Vraitha's 5,000-year dynasty. Your Highness, we'll reach the Galactic Council in approximately 20 minutes, her chief advisor, Meryl, announced. Elara nodded, her silvery eyes reflecting concern. These negotiations with the Centaurian Alliance are vital. If they... A violent explosion rocked the ship, throwing Elara against the wall. Warning sirens blared as the lights flickered. We're under attack, shouted Commander Velex, her head of security. Multiple unmarked vessels approaching from Sector 7. The royal vessel lurched as another blast hit. Elara steadied herself, reaching for the energy dagger concealed in her ceremonial robes. Though born to royalty, she'd been trained in combat since childhood, a necessity in the cutthroat politics of the Valorai Imperium. Protect the princess. Velex ordered as armed assailants breached the hull. The royal guards formed a protective circle around Elara, but they were outnumbered. One by one, her protectors fell. This way, Your Highness. Meryl pulled her toward an escape pod. Before they could reach it, a plasma bolt struck Meryl in the chest. Elara caught her loyal advisor as she collapsed. Find the truth. Meryl whispered before her eyes dimmed. Surrounded by attackers in stealth armor, Elara raised her dagger, prepared to fight to the end. If you're going to kill me, at least have the honor to show your faces, she hissed. A deafening explosion blew open the adjacent wall. Through the smoke strode a figure unlike her attackers, broader, more solid, unmistakably human. He moved with lethal precision, neutralizing 3 assailants before they could react. Come with me if you want to live, Your Highness, the human said, his voice rough. His dark armor bore the scars of countless battles, and a jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw. Elara hesitated. Humans were considered primitive by her people, useful for trade and occasionally as mercenaries, but hardly trustworthy. Yet as more attackers converged on their position, she had little choice. Why would a human help me, she demanded, still gripping her dagger. The man fired his weapon at an approaching attacker without looking. Name's Dex Blackwood. Someone paid me a lot of credits to keep you alive. Explanations can wait, unless you'd prefer to die with your dignity intact. Another explosion rocked the vessel. The ship's AI announced imminent system failure. This way, Dex said, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a maintenance shaft. Elara yanked free of his grip. I am capable of following directions, human. A hint of a smile crossed his face. After you then, Your Majesty. They navigated through smoke-filled corridors, evading pursuit. Reaching a small hangar, Dex led her to a rugged transport ship that had clearly seen better days. That's your escape plan? Elara asked incredulously. This vessel looks barely space-worthy. She's more reliable than she looks, Dex replied, punching in the access code. And she's got the best cloaking tech credits can buy. As they lifted off amid chaos, Elara watched her royal vessel crumble. Everything she had known, her security, her position, perhaps even her dynasty, was suddenly uncertain. Where are we going? She asked, attempting to maintain her royal composure despite the circumstances. Dex's eyes remained fixed on the controls. Somewhere they won't look for an alien princess, the human colonies in the Outer Rim. I know people there who can keep you safe while we figure out who wants you dead. Elara stared at the stars streaking past, her world literally and figuratively collapsing behind her. Her life now depended on a gruff human mercenary, a thought both terrifying and, strangely, exhilarating. The ship's engines hummed steadily as they navigated through an asteroid belt in the Outer Rim, far from the gilded spires of Valerai. Elara sat stiffly in the co-pilot's chair, her royal posture unchanged despite their dire circumstances. 3 days had passed since their escape, and the silence between them had grown as vast as the space around them. "Your kind doesn't speak much?" Dex asked, breaking the quiet as he adjusted their course. Elara's silvery eyes narrowed. "My kind typically doesn't converse with hired guns." "Fair enough." Dex shrugged, seemingly unbothered by her disdain. "But seeing as this hired gun is all that stands between you and whoever's trying to collect your royal head, you might want to reconsider your approach." The princess studied him, the weathered face, the capable hands on the controls, the weapon strapped to his body with practiced efficiency. Humans were considered primitive in the Valerai court, their short lives and emotional nature viewed as weaknesses. Yet there was something undeniably intriguing about this one. "Who hired you?" she finally asked. "Anonymous client. Triple my usual fee, paid in advance." He glanced at her. "Seems someone wants you alive almost as badly as others want you dead. And you didn't question this mysterious benefactor?" Dex's expression remained unreadable. "In my line of work, credits speak louder than questions." A warning light flashed on the console. Dex cursed under his breath, his fingers flying across the controls. "What is it?" Elara asked, tension evident in her voice. "Imperial patrol ship. They shouldn't be able to detect us through the cloaking field, but we're not taking chances." He veered the ship toward a dense nebula. "Brace yourself. This might get rough." The ship dove into swirling clouds of cosmic dust and gas, sensors nearly useless in the interference. Elara gripped her seat as Dex navigated by instinct, his concentration absolute. When they emerged on the other side, the patrol ship was nowhere in sight. "You've done this before," Elara observed, reluctantly impressed. "Once or twice." A hint of a smile touched his lips. As they continued their journey, Elara noticed a holographic medallion hanging near the ship's controls, military in design, but not one she recognized. "Terran Special Forces," Dex explained, catching her gaze. "Served 15 years. What happened?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. His expression darkened. "War happened. Made the mistake of questioning orders when I realized we were being used to eliminate civilian security threats on Proxima 4. "The Proxima massacre," Elara whispered. "We received reports, but our intelligence suggested it was an insurgent attack." "History's written by the winners," Dex replied bitterly. "I refuse to fire on civilians. Got court-martialed, discharged. Been taking whatever jobs keep my ship flying ever since." Something shifted in Elara's perception of him. Behind his mercenary exterior lay principles, ones that had cost him everything. An alert sounded, interrupting their conversation. "We're approaching Kelra Station," Dex announced. "It's not much to look at, but it's neutral territory. We can refuel and gather intelligence." The space station came into view, a hodgepodge of metal structures rotating slowly against the backdrop of a gas giant. Unlike the elegant architecture of Valerai, it was purely functional, teeming with various species from across the galaxy. "Stay close," Dex warned as they docked. "This place attracts all types." Elara raised an eyebrow. "I am not helpless, human. I've had combat training since childhood." "Never said you were helpless, princess. But you stick out like a supernova in a black hole. Your species isn't common out here, and those royal markings might as well be a target." He tossed her a weathered jacket and a cap. "Cover up. And try not to look so regal." Elara reluctantly donned the disguise, wrinkling her nose at the jacket's musty smell. As they entered the station, she was overwhelmed by the cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights. Merchants hawked exotic wares, smugglers exchanged furtive glances, and beings of all descriptions mingled in the controlled chaos. "Your Highness," Dex murmured, his hand subtly moving to his weapon, "don't look now, but we're being followed." Before Elara could respond, plasma fire erupted around them. Dex pushed her behind a pillar, returning fire with practiced precision. "Friends of yours?" Elara asked, drawing her energy dagger. "More likely yours," he replied. "Stay down." Instead, Elara spotted an opening and darted from cover, her movements fluid and precise. She incapacitated one attacker with a strike to the neural cluster at the base of its neck, then pivoted to avoid another's grasp. Dex stared for a split second, clearly surprised by her combat prowess, before dispatching the remaining assailants. "Not bad," he admitted as they regrouped. "Where'd a princess learn to fight like that?" "Palace life is more dangerous than you might imagine," she replied, sheathing her dagger. "Assassination attempts are practically a coming-of-age ritual in the royal court." For the first time, a genuine smile crossed Dex's face. "Maybe you're not the pampered royal I took you for. And perhaps you're not the mindless brute I assumed," she conceded. Their eyes met briefly, mutual respect kindling between them. The moment was interrupted by the wail of station security alarms. "Time to go," Dex said, taking her arm. This time, she didn't pull away. As they raced back to the ship, Elara realized something had changed. They were no longer merely a princess and her hired protector, they were allies against a common enemy. And in the vastness of space, with assassins on their trail, that alliance might be the only thing keeping them alive. "We're approaching Blackridge," Dex announced as their ship descended toward a lush, mountainous planet. After the chaos at Kelra Station, they'd spent 2 weeks evading pursuit, jumping between remote systems. Elara looked through the viewport at the planet below. Verdant forests covered rolling mountains, punctuated by waterfalls that glimmered in the light of the binary stars. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "I wouldn't expect a human colony to be so unspoiled." "It's not a colony," Dex replied. "Just one stubborn woman who prefers trees to people. An old friend who owes me a favor." The ship landed in a clearing beside a structure that seemed to grow from the mountainside itself, partly constructed, partly carved from living stone and wood. As they disembarked, a tall woman with dark skin and silver-streaked hair emerged, a pulse rifle casually resting on her shoulder. "Thought you were dead, Blackwood," she called out. "Not for lack of trying, Fiona." He clasped her arm in greeting. "Thanks for the sanctuary." Fiona's sharp eyes shifted to Elara, taking in her alien features and the partly concealed royal markings. "You always did have a talent for complicated situations." She lowered her weapon. "Come inside before someone spots your ship." The interior of Fiona's home was surprisingly sophisticated, with advanced technology seamlessly integrated into the natural materials. "Former Terran intelligence," Dex explained to Elara. "Retired to the middle of nowhere after the Proxima incident." "Retired is a polite way of putting it," Fiona said dryly. "Exiled is more accurate." She gestured for them to sit at a table laden with fresh food. "Now, why don't you tell me why you're traveling with Valori royalty?" Elara tensed. "How did you? Those markings on your temple. House Wraith, if I'm not mistaken. The pattern indicates direct lineage to the throne." Fiona served them a steaming beverage. "Intelligence work becomes habit, Your Highness." Over the meal, they recounted the assassination attempt and their subsequent flight. Fiona listened intently, occasionally asking incisive questions. "I need to access secure communication channels," Elara explained. "Contact my loyal supporters without revealing my location." Fiona nodded. "I can help with that." But first, she activated a holographic display showing recent news from the Valori Imperium. A familiar face dominated the screen, Elara's cousin, Prince Tarek. Sources confirm Princess Elara's tragic death in a terrorist attack, a newscaster announced. Prince Tarek has assumed the regency in this time of mourning, promising to bring the perpetrators to justice. Ilara's face drained of color. Tarek, she whispered. He's behind this. He's always resented that a female heir took precedence over him. Classic power play, Fiona agreed. Eliminate the rightful heir, blame terrorists, seize control during the chaos. That night, after Fiona had retired, Ilara found herself unable to sleep. She wandered onto a balcony overlooking the forested valley, the alien stars unfamiliar yet somehow comforting in their distance. Trouble sleeping? Dex's voice came from the shadows. He joined her at the railing, offering a flask. Local spirit. Strong, but it helps. Ilara accepted it, wincing slightly at the burn. My entire life, I was prepared to rule. Taught that duty to my people came before all else. She handed the flask back, their fingers brushing momentarily. Now I'm declared dead, while my treacherous cousin sits on my throne. We'll get it back, Dex said simply. We? She turned to face him, surprised by his commitment. I was hired to keep you alive, princess. His eyes reflected the starlight. Job's not done until you're safely back on your throne. And if the mysterious client who hired you was Tarek himself? A ploy to track my movements? Dex considered this. Then I've been played for a fool. Wouldn't be the first time. He leaned closer. But my instincts say otherwise. And I've learned to trust them. Ilara became acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the scent of him that had become strangely familiar. Without the pretense of royalty to maintain, she found herself drawn to his raw authenticity. Your instincts, she murmured, what do they tell you about me? His gaze intensified. That you're the most fascinating woman I've encountered across 12 systems. That beneath that royal exterior is someone who fights like a demon and never gives up. His voice lowered. And that I'm breaking every professional code by thinking about you the way I do. The air between them charged with unspoken tension. Ilara had never permitted herself such feelings. Attraction was a weakness, a distraction from duty. Yet here, separated from everything she had known, those principles seemed as distant as Valerai itself. She reached up, her four-fingered hand tracing the scar on his face. And what exactly are you thinking, Dex Blackwood? In answer, he closed the distance between them. Their lips met tentatively at first, then with increasing urgency. Ilara felt a rush of sensation unlike anything she'd experienced, a burning that started where they touched and spread throughout her body. His arms encircled her, strong yet gentle, as if she were something precious. When they finally parted, both breathless, Ilara saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. That was. She began. Probably a terrible idea, he finished, though he made no move to step away. A sound from inside the house broke the moment. Fiona stood in the doorway, her expression grave. You'll want to see this, she said, gesturing them inside. I've intercepted a coded transmission from the palace. Tarek is moving faster than anticipated. He's scheduled his formal coronation for the day of Ascension, 3 weeks from now. Ilara's royal composure returned instantly. Once he completes the rite of sovereignty, his claim becomes legitimate under Valerai law. Then we have 3 weeks to stop him, Dex said, his tactical mind already working. Fiona, what's the most secure communication hub in this sector? The Nexus Array on Caldaris. Heavily guarded, but it has direct links to all major systems, including Valerai. We need to send proof I'm alive to my allies, Ilara stated, determination replacing vulnerability. General Corvin commands the Western Fleet. He was loyal to my father and would never accept Tarek's claim if he knew the truth. Dex nodded. We leave at dawn. As they prepared for their next move, the memory of their kiss lingered between them, a moment of connection that had transcended their differences. Whatever came next, something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer merely allies against a common enemy, they had become something more complex, more dangerous. And as the binary stars rose over Blackridge, illuminating their ship as it prepared for departure, both knew that their fates had become irrevocably entwined. The Nexus array on Caldaris loomed before them, a massive structure of interlocking rings and spires that housed the most powerful communication technology in the sector. Dex guided their ship toward a maintenance dock, expertly bypassing the main security checkpoints. "Fiona's credentials got us this far," he murmured, powering down the engines. "But once we're inside, we'll be on our own." Ilara adjusted the modified uniform Fiona had provided. The insignia of a Caldaris technician now covered her royal markings. "How long will we have once we access the central hub?" 5 minutes at most before security systems detect the unauthorized transmission. Dex checked his weapons one final time. Then it's a race back to the ship. Their eyes met, and the memory of their kiss on Blackridge hung between them. Neither had spoken of it during their journey, both focusing instead on the mission ahead. Yet it had changed the energy between them, charged every glance, every accidental touch with new meaning. "Ready?" Dex asked softly. Ilara nodded. "Let's reclaim my throne." They moved through the station with practiced coordination, their time together having forged an almost telepathic connection. Dex's combat experience complemented Ilara's knowledge of Imperial protocols, allowing them to navigate the complex without raising alarms. At a junction, Dex held up a hand, signaling Ilara to stop. A security patrol passed by, mere meters from their position. When the guards had gone, he led her through a maintenance shaft toward the central communication hub. "There," Ilara whispered, pointing to a heavily secured door. "That's our target." Dex approached the biometric scanner, applying a device Fiona had provided. The security system hesitated, then flashed green. "Remind me to thank your friend if we survive this," Ilara murmured as they slipped inside. The communication hub was a marvel of technology, banks of quantum processors surrounding a central console. Ilara moved immediately to the controls, her fingers dancing across the interface with practiced ease. "You've done this before," Dex observed, taking up a defensive position by the door. "Royal training includes emergency communication protocols." She worked quickly, bypassing security measures. "I need 2 more minutes to establish a secure channel to General Corvin." "Make it fast," Dex said, tension evident in his voice. "We've got company." Security alarms began to wail throughout the station. Through the door's small window, Dex could see armed guards assembling in the corridor. "Whatever you're doing, Princess, do it faster." Ilara's concentration never wavered as she completed the transmission, a recorded message proving she was alive, explaining Tarek's treachery, and instructing Corvin to gather loyal forces at the outer colonies. "It's done," she announced, just as the first blast hit the door. "Time to go." Dex tossed her a weapon. "Our exit just got complicated." They moved to a secondary door at the rear of the hub. As it opened, they found themselves facing 4 guards. Without hesitation, Dex and Ilara moved in perfect synchronization. He disabled 2 with precise shots while she incapacitated the others with lightning-fast strikes. "Impressive," Dex commented as they raced down the corridor. "I told you," Ilara replied, breathless but exhilarated, "palace life requires certain skills." They fought their way through the station, their movements becoming an intricate dance of survival. When Ilara stumbled, Dex was there to catch her. When he was pinned down by enemy fire, she created the diversion he needed to advance. Finally reaching the maintenance dock, they found their ship surrounded by security forces. "Now what?" Ilara asked, ducking behind a cargo container as plasma bolts scorched the air above them. Dex's eyes scanned their surroundings, tactical mind working. "There," he pointed to a fuel line running along the ceiling. Cover me. Elara provided suppressing fire as Dex made his way to a control panel. With a few quick adjustments, he triggered a cascade of emergency protocols. Warning lights flashed as coolant began venting into the docking bay. On my mark, he called to Elara, run for the ship. Don't stop for anything. When the security forces momentarily retreated from the spreading coolant, Dex shouted, now. They sprinted across the open space, plasma bolts cutting through the mist around them. Reaching the ship, Dex practically threw Elara inside before diving in after her. The engines roared to life as the docking bay doors began to close. Hold on, he yelled, pushing the thrusters beyond safety limits. The ship shot forward, barely clearing the narrowing gap. Once safely in orbit, Elara collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Did we succeed? Will the message reach Corvin? If Fiona's encryption works as promised, yes. Dex's hands were steady on the controls despite the chaos they just escaped. Now we need somewhere to lay low until he responds. Elara nodded, then suddenly winced, her hand going to her side. Dex noticed immediately. You're hit. He engaged the autopilot and moved to examine her injury, a plasma graze along her ribs, painful but not life-threatening. It's nothing, she insisted, though her silver eyes betrayed her pain. Let me see. His voice was gentle but firm as he helped her remove the outer layer of her uniform, revealing the wound. Their proximity sent a different kind of heat through her body, distracting from the pain. Dex cleaned and dressed the injury with careful hands that had seen their share of battlefield medicine. You'll live, princess, he murmured, but made no move to withdraw. The confined space of the ship, the lingering adrenaline of their escape, and the relief of survival converged in a moment of clarity. Elara reached up, her hand cupping Dex's face. When I'm with you, she whispered, I don't feel like a princess. I feel alive. His eyes darkened with desire. Elara. She silenced him with a kiss that contained none of the hesitation of their first. This was hunger, pure and demanding. His response was immediate, arms encircling her, mindful of her injury but unyielding in his passion. Clothes were discarded with urgent hands, revealing the stark differences in their physiology, her iridescent skin against his sun-darkened human form. Yet as they explored each other, those differences became points of fascination rather than division. Dex traced the bioluminescent patterns that appeared on her skin as her arousal grew, marveling at their beauty. Elara discovered the sensitivity of his neck, the strength in his shoulders, the heat of his mouth as it traveled down her body. When they finally joined, the sensation was overwhelming, a connection that transcended their different species, positions, backgrounds. In the privacy of the ship's cabin, drifting through the vastness of space, they were simply a man and a woman finding solace and passion in each other's arms. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head resting on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. Neither spoke of what their union might mean, of the impossibility of a future between a Valori princess and a human mercenary. For now, it was enough to exist in this moment, suspended between worlds. We should set course for the rendezvous point, Elara eventually murmured, though she made no move to leave his embrace. We've got time, Dex replied, pulling her closer. The stars can wait a little longer. As the ship drifted through the darkness, carrying them toward an uncertain future, they found temporary sanctuary in each other, a forbidden paradise neither had expected to discover amidst the chaos of war and betrayal. The royal city of Valori glittered beneath twin moons, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars that had witnessed the dynasty's rise millennia ago. From their vantage point in the mountains overlooking the capital, Elara surveyed her home with mixed emotions. Strange, she murmured, how something can be so familiar yet feel so distant. Beside her, Dex adjusted the tactical display showing the positions of General Corvin's forces surrounding the city. 2 weeks had passed since their daring communication from Caldaris. Corvin had responded swiftly, gathering loyal troops and vessels to restore Ilara to her rightful place. "Your people will welcome your return," Dex said, though his tone lacked conviction. Ilara glanced at him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the careful distance he maintained. Since their passionate night aboard the ship, a new complexity had entered their relationship. As they'd drawn closer to Valerai in the reality of her position, Dex had gradually withdrawn, his manner becoming more formal, more like the mercenary he'd been when they first met. She understood why. Each step toward the palace was a step toward their inevitable separation. A Valerai royal could never openly take a human consort. Such a union would be considered not merely inappropriate but biologically incompatible by her conservative court. "Corvin's forces are in position," came Fiona's voice through the communicator. She had joined them for the final phase, her intelligence background proving invaluable. The palace guard remains divided in loyalty. Half still answer to Tarek, but many question his claim. "What of the coronation preparations?" Ilara asked. "Proceeding as planned. The right of sovereignty is scheduled for tomorrow's dawn." Ilara's expression hardened. "Then we move tonight." Their plan was elegant in its simplicity. While Corvin's forces created a diversion at the city's western perimeter, a small team led by Ilara would infiltrate the palace through ancient tunnels known only to the royal family. Their target, the sovereign chamber, where Tarek would be undergoing ritual purification before the coronation. As darkness fell, they moved into position. Ilara had exchanged her makeshift clothing for traditional Valerai battle attire, a form-fitting suit of iridescent material that adapted to her movements. The royal markings on her temple were now fully visible, a declaration of her identity and claim. Dex, watching her transform back into the royal she was born to be, felt the gulf between them widen. Yet when their eyes met, he saw not the distant princess but the woman who had fought at his side, who had shared his bed and his secrets. "Whatever happens," he said quietly as they prepared to enter the tunnels, "it's been an honor, Ilara." She touched his face, a gesture that had become intimate between them. "This isn't goodbye, Dex." He wanted to believe her. The ancient tunnels were as Ilara remembered from childhood explorations, twisting passages carved from living crystal, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi. They moved silently, Dex and Fiona flanking Ilara protectively as they ascended toward the palace. Above, the first sounds of Corvin's diversion reached them, the distant boom of explosions, the wail of alarm systems. "Right on schedule," Fiona murmured. They emerged in a seldom-used chamber near the royal quarters. Palace guards ran past their position, responding to the threat at the perimeter. Taking advantage of the chaos, they made their way toward the sovereign chamber. "Two guards at the entrance," Dex reported after scouting ahead. "No sign of Tarek yet." Ilara nodded. "I'll approach openly. My presence alone will cause confusion, few believe I still live." Before Dex could object, she stepped into the corridor, her regal bearing unmistakable. The guards froze in shock at the sight of the supposedly dead princess. "Your Highness," one gasped, weapon wavering. "Stand aside," Ilara commanded with the full authority of her bloodline. "Your true sovereign has returned." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Taking advantage of their hesitation, Dex and Fiona emerged from hiding, neutralizing them before they could raise an alarm. Inside the sovereign chamber, they found not Tarek but his chief advisor, Vener, the same man who had served Ilara's father. His eyes widened at the sight of Ilara. "Impossible," he whispered. "Where is Tarek?" Ilara demanded. "The central spire. He received word of your approach and has taken the crown of ascension there. If he completes the ritual at the spire's apex, even your return won't invalidate his claim." Without hesitation, they raced toward the central spire, the tallest structure in the palace complex, its peak piercing the clouds above the city. As they ascended its winding staircase, they encountered resistance from guards loyal to Tarek. Each confrontation slowed their progress, time slipping away with every exchange of fire. "Go," Fiona urged after a particularly fierce skirmish left her wounded. "I'll hold this position. Stop him before it's too late." Dex and Elara continued upward, their bodies aching from combat and exertion. Near the top, they found themselves faced with a contingent of elite guards protecting the final approach to the apex. "There's too many," Dex muttered, assessing their odds. Elara's eyes gleamed with determination. "There's another way." She led him to a maintenance shaft, a narrow passage used by servants to tend the spire's exterior. "It leads directly to the apex." The shaft was barely wide enough for Dex's broader human frame, but they managed to ascend, emerging onto the windswept platform at the spire's peak. There stood Tarek, the crown of ascension in his hands, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. "Cousin," he said, unsurprised by her appearance. "Always the survivor." "This ends now, Tarek," Elara declared, her voice carrying over the howling wind. "Surrender the crown." Tarek's face contorted with rage. "Never. Valerai deserve stronger rule than a female heir can provide, especially one who consorts with humans." He gestured contemptuously at Dex. "Yes, I know about your indiscretions. The court would never accept you now, even if you lived." He raised a weapon, aiming not at Elara but at Dex. Without hesitation, Elara threw herself into the line of fire. The blast struck her shoulder, spinning her toward the platform's edge. Time seemed to slow as she teetered on the brink of the vast drop. Dex lunged forward, catching her hand as she fell, his grip the only thing preventing her plummet to certain death. Tarek approached, weapon trained on Dex's exposed back. How fitting. The last of House Vraith's direct line, saved only by the strength of a human. "Release her, mercenary, and I might let you live." Dex's muscles strained as he held Elara suspended above the abyss. Their eyes locked in a moment of perfect understanding. With a barely perceptible nod, Elara gave him the signal. In one fluid motion, Dex heaved her upward just as she activated her energy dagger. Propelled by his strength, she flew over his shoulder, her blade finding its mark in Tarek's chest before he could fire again. "The throne was never yours to take," she whispered as her treacherous cousin collapsed. As the sun crested the horizon, Elara stood at the apex of the central spire, the crown of ascension in her hands, Dex at her side. Below, the city awakened to the news of her miraculous return. General Corvin's forces had secured the palace, and loyalists throughout the Imperium were already pledging themselves to their rightful sovereign. Victory, however, brought with it the reality they had both been avoiding. As Elara prepared for the formal restoration ceremony, Dex packed his few possessions aboard his ship. "You're leaving," she said from the doorway of the docking bay, her voice carefully neutral despite the pain in her eyes. Dex turned, drinking in the sight of her, now fully restored to her royal status, the ceremonial robes of House Vraith emphasizing her alien beauty. "We both know I don't belong here, princess." The formality was deliberate, a reminder of the gulf between them. "And if I asked you to stay?" He crossed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "You know what would happen. Your court would never accept me, and eventually, that would undermine your authority. Your people need their queen, not a scandal." Tears glimmered in her silver eyes. "So that's it? After everything we've been through, everything we've shared?" Dex kissed her then, pouring all his unspoken feelings into that final contact. When they parted, both were breathless. "I was hired to keep you alive and restore you to your throne," he said softly. "Mission accomplished. And us? Was that just part of the mission too?" His expression softened. "You know it wasn't." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they couldn't say, the future they couldn't have. Finally, Elara squared her shoulders, royal dignity reasserting itself. The coronation is in 3 days. At least stay for that. Dex hesitated, then nodded. 3 days. The ceremony was everything a royal coronation should be, magnificent, solemn, steeped in tradition. As Alara knelt to receive the crown of ascension, her gaze found Dex among the assembled dignitaries. For a moment, she was transported back to their first meeting aboard her doomed vessel, to their battles side by side, to the nights they had shared. When she rose, the crown upon her head, she was no longer merely Princess Alara but Sovereign Alara of House Wraith, ruler of the Valori Imperium. The crowd's acclaim washed over her as she took her place on the ancient throne. Later, as celebrations continued throughout the city, Alara slipped away to the Royal Observatory, a domed chamber at the palace's highest point, offering an unobstructed view of the stars. There she found Dex, as she had known she would. "Your Majesty," he greeted her with a formal bow that couldn't quite mask the warmth in his eyes. "I've been thinking," she said, approaching him. "About traditions and change. Dangerous combination." She smiled. The Valori have always prided themselves on tradition. But what is tradition except the innovations of our ancestors, preserved by time? Dex raised an eyebrow, uncertain where she was leading. "My first act as sovereign will be to establish a new diplomatic corps, representatives who will forge stronger ties with other species, including humans." Her eyes held his. Such an initiative would require a special envoy, someone who understands both worlds. Understanding dawned in his expression. "Are you offering me a job, Your Majesty?" "I'm offering you a reason to return," she replied softly. "The stars between us need not be a permanent divide." Dex took her hand, his thumb tracing the patterns on her skin. "And the court? The traditions? Will adapt, as they must. I am sovereign now, I make the traditions." Her free hand touched the crown she still wore. "Besides, the Valori live for centuries. Change comes slowly, but it comes." He drew her into his arms, protocol forgotten in this private moment. "I never liked permanent goodbyes anyway." Their lips met in a kiss that bridged worlds, human and Valori, soldier and sovereign, steel and starlight. Outside the observatory's dome, the stars witnessed their union, silent guardians of a love that defied convention and circumstance. In the vastness of the universe, they had found each other against impossible odds. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges, separations, and reunions awaited them, that connection would endure, a testament to the power of two hearts that refused to be bound by the limitations of their different worlds. As dawn broke over Valori once more, Dex's ship lifted off from the royal docking bay. But unlike the mercenary who had once fled the capital with a reluctant princess in tow, this man departed with purpose, with connection, with the promise of return. And in the highest tower of the palace, Sovereign Alara watched his departure not with sorrow but with anticipation, for the day when starlight and steel would converge once more.